What? Why are you shaking your head? You're welcome.
Hey guys, and welcome to the Underdog Drafter Party. I'm Jake Tribbey here with my co-host, one of the best football writers around, Ryan Heath. We will be drafting Battle Royale teams, talking about our favorite scroll down options, and discussing contest-specific strategy throughout the show. Ryan, how you doing this week, man?
Doing great, man. It's a weird slate, short slate, difficult slate, but I think I got some takes here. I'm kind of excited for this one, as gross and weird as it is.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that you have some takes. I've done a handful of drafts here. I find myself landing on a lot of pretty similar builds, so I'm certainly looking to branch out a bit. I feel like I have a good grip on the DFS slate, still sort of working through things a bit from a Battle Royale perspective. As always, we'll start with quarterback this week. We'll go position by position, then we'll talk about some contests, then we'll draft some teams and answer any pressing questions you guys have about the Week 10 slate, whether it's start sit, DFS, Battle Royale, even just questions about life. We'll take anything. But Ryan, starting with quarterback here, to me, I find myself landing on Brock Purdy and Sam Darnold quite a bit. Purdy right now, by underdog scoring, is actually our highest projected quarterback in the FantasyPoints projections, which is pretty wild. Would not have really ever expected a slate where Purdy has a higher projection than Jaden Daniels, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts. But, I mean, the matchup is so damn good for Brock Purdy. Obviously, this Tampa Bay defense has been very vulnerable. What are your thoughts on Purdy? What are your thoughts on Darnold? Any other quarterbacks you're looking at this week?
Yeah, let's spend some time on Purdy. So as you say, the matchup's incredible. The schematic matchup is incredible. This is like a best possible spot for the 49ers, where the Buccaneers just spam all of this zone coverage. Kind of how teams have beaten the 49ers or limited them this year has been playing a lot of man, like limiting all the yards after catch. But the Bucs likely won't do that. Even if they do, Christian McCaffrey is back. That opens up so much for the receivers, as Kyle Shanahan has said himself very frequently over the last 10 weeks. So yeah, they're very excited to have him back. I'm excited for this offense to have him back. And yeah, I want lots of Purdy exposure on this slate. I'm willing to reach for him above his ADP. As you mentioned, we have him projected as the best quarterback anyway. Totally fine taking like a stance on that. And the other reason is, if you take, especially Kittle, but if you go even Debo and Kittle and don't get Purdy like on the wraparound in like the fourth round, your team feels screwed, because all of the mobile quarterbacks that you don't have to stack are probably gone at that point. It feels pointless to take a Sam Darnold without a Justin Jefferson. Mahomes doesn't project all that well. You can kind of save it with like a Darnell Mooney, Kirk Cousins kind of thing, which I don't hate. That's like the only way to get out of getting sniped that I don't hate on this slate, because there's just so few viable options for scroll downs at the QB position. So anytime I'm taking Kittle in the second round, I'm just taking Purdy in the third. I'm fine with reaching on him. I think the projections flatten out enough by that point that I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
As for Darnold, go ahead.
I just wanted to add on Purdy that, like, I'm totally with you reaching for Purdy. I will say that I do think you can save the builds a bit with a Baker Mayfield. Say you draft Debo, Kittle, you end up waiting a bit too long on Purdy, come back with Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield has been playing out of his mind. And outside of Cade Otton, there's no one else who's going to be drafted on the Bucs in this, in Battle Royale formats, at least in 6-mans. In 12-mans, things are a little bit different. But I do think you can kind of save things with the Baker Mayfield team and just hope that, he throws a couple touchdowns to Raheem Jarrett and Ryan Miller and somehow outscores Purdy. And then all of a sudden, or even just gets close, then you're still in a decent spot. But, I agree. I think you do want to reach for Purdy when you are grabbing, Debo and Kittle. But continue. What are your thoughts on Sam Darnold and some of these other quarterbacks, Ryan?
I'll chime in on Baker first. Yeah, I mean, I agree that's good. I'd rather have K-Dot in on every Baker team, but I agree just playing him naked, especially if you do something like Debo and Kittle and you're really screwed and can only kind of go Baker and just want to bet on the game environment. I think that's totally fine as well. Might be more of like a main slate stance that I take, but yeah, I think Baker's good as well. Darnold, yeah, it just kind of, as you said, if I have Jefferson, I'll take Darnold, and that it's just kind of linear like that. Obviously, want to mix the builds up a little bit, like because Justin Jefferson's the only like incredible wide receiver on this slate. Yeah, maybe I want to try to get like a Jefferson and Purdy combo in case Jefferson goes off and Purdy also does. That like I could certainly see that happening. But yeah, I'd say most of my Jefferson teams I want Darnold. Yeah, other than that, no huge takes. Like I don't have that much interest in Jalen Hurts, who is potentially injured, but not really. Sirianni went back and forth on whether that was rest or an ankle or, oh, did it say it on the injury report? Yeah, the Eagles are going to run the ball an insane amount. Saquon Barkley might have 30 carries this week, and I would not be surprised at all. So I mean, yeah, the mobile quarterback I'm most interested in is Josh Allen, because you can get like a pretty contrarian little single stack with him and with either Khalil Shakir or Dalton Kincaid. With Keon Coleman out, that offense should be condensing. The Colts are a good schematic matchup for both Kincaid and for Shakir. So I definitely don't hate doing that. Josh Downs or Jonathan Taylor is nice on the bring back. But it's just every week Allen is so expensive that I'm not. Yeah, I don't know. Like I will force myself to do it on a few drafts. Like I definitely want exposure, but never am I thinking like, oh man, I would really rather take Josh Allen than a Garrett Wilson or than a Jonathan Taylor right now. He's always just too expensive in this format, and it's really aggravating. But
yeah, it's definitely a tough sell at ADP with Josh Allen, but I'm right there with you. I think I am going to force myself to draft a few of those teams. I have seen them fall to, closer to pick 14, 15 in a handful of drafts. So obviously, that would be the spot to grab Josh Allen if you can. I mean, pick 8, 9, 10. It's a much harder sell for me, but you do still want some exposure there in this game. Any other thoughts at quarterback before we move on?
No, that's pretty much it. I mean, the only true, if you get through 4 rounds and you have no concept of a stack started up, I think Darnell Mooney, Kirk Cousins is probably your best bet. The Saints are pretty depleted, as you guys talked about on cashing points at outside corner right now. Mooney has obviously looked awesome. London's a bit banged up. You can do it with London as well. Obviously, I've seen him fall to the 6th round. So if he doesn't play, then you're getting a swap there, and that's fine. That I don't even know if I'll actually do this, but after that, it would be Justin Herbert, Lad McConkey for me as far as just an emergency single stack. There really are no like mobile QBs that you can just throw naked onto a build to save it this week, which is also unfortunate. I guess Bo Nix and Drake May would be the candidates, but both of those matchups are terrible. So yeah, that's kind of where I would be funneling myself into, is mostly Cousins, maybe Herbert.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you. I had a little bit of interest in Rodgers. I think that's more of a DFS take than it is a battle royale take. I do think even though Garrett Wilson is a great play, it's just going to be hard for him to compete in terms of raw points with the Russian quarterbacks at the top or Purdy or Darnold. Not super eager to take Rodgers, but I have, as you can see from the great tools at bestballoverlay.com, I have taken one Rodgers team. I believe it was a Rodgers double with both Wilson and Devontae Adams. I think that's an interesting angle, but certainly not something I want on more than 4 or 5% of my teams. But like I mentioned, bestballoverlay.com, if you want this awesome overlay for drafting your battle royale teams, super, super helpful. Something that I use, and that's the only reason I endorse the tool, is because it's something I use and something I find incredibly helpful. So if you guys want to support the show, you can use promo code PARTY at checkout to save $10 a month on the bestballoverlay.com tool. Really good stuff. We had Pat on last week, Fantasy Dog Pound, who is one of the guys behind the bestballoverlay.com tool. And he's great. The team behind it is great. It's super, super helpful. So definitely go check that out. We can move on to running back. Ryan, I think there are maybe 12 or 15 running backs that I feel very, very comfortable with on this slate. It's an extremely deep running back slate here. What are your thoughts on these running backs? Because again, I'm pretty much fine with all these guys.
Yeah, I mean, most of these guys are really great plays. I would say that. So Justin Jefferson's the 101, just based on how not on how thin the wide receiver position is on this slate. But yeah, once he's off the board, I would love all the Barkley, all the Kamara exposure. With Christian McCaffrey, I do think you can stack him with Purdy. He's involved enough in the passing game. The Bucs are a very big underneath funnel. So that's one way to get maybe a little bit more unique with the Purdy stacks is to take him on the same team as McCaffrey. Aaron Jones and Jonathan Taylor both pop as pretty solid ADP values by our projections, both in pretty much incredible matchups. Jones, I think, also is viable on Darnold teams. The receiving role is definitely good enough. The Jaguars are, I think, second to only the Bills in terms of receiving schedule adjusted allowed to running backs. So that lines up as well. But yeah, I mean, after that kind of top tier, I'm not super like fast to jump on the Kareem Hunts or the James Cooks. DeAndre Swift is in an incredible spot. He's been really game script sensitive this season. He's averaging, I think, as the RB4 in fantasy points per game in games the Bears win. I think it's a 6-point spread, so feel pretty good about him in that spot. You're getting more of an ownership discount if you go to a Najee Harris, to a Ramondre Stevenson, both of whom I know we've talked about a lot, Jake, this morning, as well as throughout the week. I think Harris and Stevenson are both in pretty good spots this week. I don't know that you have to go past that. That's kind of like where the big drop off is to me. So, but yeah, I mean, you're getting enough of an ownership discount on a Harris, on a Stevenson, that I don't know that you need more. But you tell me if you disagree.
No, yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you. I'm very comfortable with any of these top 14 running backs. I think the guy that I would be the most down on would be James Cook, just because the snap share hasn't quite been there. Obviously, Josh Allen could vulture those rushing touchdowns. We have seen Ray Davis get a little bit more involved. So James Cook would be, probably the guy, if I did 200 drafts, that I would have the least exposure to. But this is a very, very strong running back slate. It is not a very strong wide receiver slate. Before we get into wide receivers, just wanted to acknowledge the chat real quick. Love the questions, guys. We will get to them shortly once we hop into a couple drafts here. So feel free to keep them coming. Always love answering your pressing week 10 questions while we're drafting, because there can be plenty of downtime with that. But yeah, wide receiver here, as Ryan already noted, I think Justin Jefferson is clearly the 101. Jacksonville is such an incredible matchup. Really the only concern for this Minnesota passing attack, and this does apply to, Jefferson maybe less so, but certainly applies to Sam Darnold, is that they might just not get pushed here. Minnesota has led on, something close to 80% of their plays this season. So we really haven't seen a lot of great volume from Sam Darnold. That said, it's such a weak wide receiver slate, I think, especially after these top three are off the board between Jefferson, Garrett Wilson, and Deebo Samuel, that I still want as much Jefferson as I can get my hands on. I've seen him fall as far as the 103. Obviously, I'm always grabbing him there. Pretty much always grabbing him at the 102 as well, and he's been my 101 a decent chunk of the time. I do still want some Saquon exposure, so I can't say I'd take him 101 every single time, assuming these current ADPs hold. Ryan, outside of these top three guys, I think that's when things get really tricky here. Is there anyone who's standing out to you once we get out of the first couple rounds?
I mean, not particularly, right? So I think AJ Brown, if you want to tell yourself the story of how the Eagles have to throw this week, I think that's fine. The schematic matchup is in his favor. Cowboys have been playing a lot of single high, or have been a bit more of an outside funnel. So that, I'm not going to have a lot of exposure, but if you have a contrarian view on that game, I think he's fine. Adams is also fine. I just really prefer Wilson. He's just gotten a lot more target volume. Lamb, I think, is interesting. I think Lamb in our projections is popped, or I have seen Lamb fall a lot. I'll say that. It's because he had the Q tag up until 3:00 this afternoon. So you may see that less. So I may not like the value on Lamb as much as I did earlier today. But yeah, after that, it gets rough. Not a whole lot of interest in Terry McLaurin or in the Commanders passing attack this week. It's just pretty rough. The Mooney and London are both fine, as we kind of talked about earlier, but I'd say the big value on this slate, and where wide receiver frankly kind of ends for me, is Josh Downs. Just incredible slot funnel matchup with the Bills. Good schematic matchup. Downs actually leads the NFL in targets per route run against too high looks this year. The Bills rank top 4 in rate of too high. They haven't done it every game, but I mean, that's been their lean. So I do think it matters. And obviously Downs has been very highly targeted in games with Joe Flacco. Michael Pittman is out. So I think Downs is just clearly the best play here at ADP. I would be taking him over both the Falcons guys pretty easily straight up. I'd be taking him over a George Pickens straight up. So I will say, if you're getting like to the end of or to the last 2 rounds of your draft, and let's say it's like, okay, I have my core built. I just need to add a wide receiver and a running back, let's say. I would just always take Downs first, because wide receiver is just done after him. Yeah. Outside of correlation stuff, with like a Shakir or with like a Brian Thomas bring back or something, I'm just not interested in the receiver position after Downs. So I just always take him. There are more scroll down running backs that, the supply is just higher of the scroll down running backs. So I'm okay if I don't specifically end up with my favorite one, as long as I lock up Downs for my teams that don't have 2 wide receivers by then.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. So we do actually publish free rankings in the Fantasy Points Discord in the Underdog Battle Royale channel. Josh Downs is a guy who you will see in both, the rankings that I display on the show and in the rankings that we drop in Discord around tomorrow, right around noon. Downs will be a guy that we are notably higher on because he just projects so well. Definitely worth getting in the Fantasy Points Discord if you guys are drafting any underdog teams, because you can just upload those rankings directly into Underdog, use them as a great proxy for value. It's really just a blend of ADP and our projections. So you're not getting like these huge reaches, but you are, still getting pushed towards the best values, guys like Josh Downs. So definitely check out the Fantasy Points Discord. Wrapping things up with tight end here. This is actually a pretty decent tight end slate. In DFS, I think it's going to be a pretty big week for tight end in the flex. Certainly not something I'm doing in Battle Royale. I think this is by far the best week we've had all year for 2 running back builds, as opposed to, 3 wide receivers or double tight end, which again, isn't really something I've ever done in Battle Royale. So it would certainly suggest always grabbing 2 running backs this week. If you're grabbing 100 teams, I'd probably want 2 running backs on 85 or 90 of those teams. But back to tight end. George Kittle is in a fantastic spot here. By fantasy points per game, he is the wide receiver 8, despite being listed as a tight end. Travis Kelce seeing incredible volume. So is Cade Otton, who, Ryan, if I remember correctly, leads all players in fantasy points over the last 3 weeks. That's not something I thought I would ever say or ever even read in my entire life from the Everything Report. Just absolutely crazy. Ryan, are you comfortable with those top 3? And is there anyone else that you like here at the tight end position?
Yeah, I love the top 3, and I preferably I'm getting like 80% or so of my team spread between those 3 guys. Because I think all 3 of them, obviously I love the game environment for the 49ers and for the Buccaneers. And Kelce is just in an ideal schematic matchup with the Broncos playing a lot of single high, which he's been incredible against. Surtain, what is likely to be on DeAndre Hopkins anytime that he's outside. Broncos have just been a little bit more vulnerable to tight ends. So I love all 3 of the top guys. After that, I'm kind of whatever. Like we have McBride projected pretty clearly as the 4th. But just in terms of upside and kind of how I expect that game to go, with the Cardinals wanting to be very run heavy. And also just that McBride doesn't score very much. I'm not like too pressed about tight end after those 3 are off the board. So I'll just kind of let that go to my last pick usually. And I think Taysom is interesting. I liked him better last week when he wasn't a top 5 or a top 6 ADP and you were getting an ownership discount. I mean, it's definitely still fine. Like you have a tight end that's likely to get at least a couple goal line carries. So that always helps. I think it's an okay week to scroll down at tight end. I think, as I was talking about earlier, if you have Allen, I think Dalton Kincaid is definitely viable. The target volume has come up there. Again, you worry about like his red zone playing time. Like they just play Knox in the red zone a lot more than Kincaid, unfortunately. But I mean, I can even talk myself into like a TJ Hawkinson against a defense that has just been very bad all around. We don't know exactly how much Hawkinson's role is going to increase this week, but if it's anything like it was last year, then he's definitely priced way too low, both here and on the DFS slate. Dallas Goedert, as knowing he's now active, I'm not super into that game environment, but that's one way you could go, I suppose. But yeah, probably keeping it to like Kincaid and Hawkinson as my scroll downs. I don't know if you need to get to Pitts with what the role is there. If I were like prioritizing cousin stacks, then maybe I'd mix him in more. But yeah, I do think if you miss out on the top 3, it makes sense to get your ownership discount at tight end this week, would be my take.
Yeah, I certainly think that makes a lot of sense. A guy like Dallas Goedert, I'd probably be only interested in like Jalen Hurts builds. And that's how I am viewing a lot of these tight ends, as they are mostly correlation plays. But yeah, definitely a good way to save on ownership near the end. I think we've spent enough time covering the plays individually. We can hop into some drafts here. This is a somber week, Ryan. This is very, very sad. They got rid of my favorite tournament, the Wildcat has been completely eliminated, despite the fact that it always filled. I think they just want to push more people toward the main battle royale, which is a shame because I love the payout structure of the Wildcat. So you'll certainly see us draft a lot of battle royale teams on this stream. Dog Bowl is still the Dog Bowl. Rake is crazy high, but you do get a trip to Dallas if you finish top 3. So if you're interested in that trip, that social experience, only heard great things.
How did our Dog Bowl team do last week? I'm assuming not very good.
It did not do particularly.
Herbert. Yeah,
it did not do particularly well. I forget exactly where it finished, but it wasn't. I am not going to Dallas, Ryan. I hate to spoil it. But yeah, beyond that, the fullback dive would pretty clearly be my favorite overall tournament. Kind of similar payout structure to the Wildcat, where it doesn't pay like a very high percentage of total entrants, but it does have like very condensed prizes at the top. The bomb is fine. Beyond that, I think, my next favorite tournament would probably be the Deposit Kingdom Weekly League, which is smaller field, only $10 entry. It is kind of a shame that they nuked a lot of the smaller dollar contests, I think, again, to push people toward the main battle royale. Badge Bros Brawl is always interesting. That's a tournament where, guys like Purdy and Darnold are going to be extra valuable because it is only 3-person drafts, as you guys see. So we might try to hop into one of those tonight just to show off. Because I think that's a good way to grab Purdy and Darnold exposure, as they won't be super highly owned there. But let's start things off with a main battle royale draft. We can grab a couple questions while we wait for this to fill. So if you guys have anything pressing on the week 10 slate, feel free to drop it in the chat. Really appreciate the questions we've gotten so far. King of King 776 asks, flex Rico Dowdle, Xavier Legette, Quentin Johnston, or Bucky Irving. I would probably lean toward Dowdle, but I don't have a very strong opinion there. Do you have a take, Ryan?
I feel it. So I'm like too confident in what this game environment's going to look like, but I just don't expect the Cowboys to be able to run the ball very much. Like they may try, but yeah, I'd be a little worried on Dowdle. I don't. If you check our projections, I wouldn't be surprised if Quentin Johnston is the highest of that group. Yeah, I don't know. I'd probably agree with you though. I'd probably go Dowdle, just for at least the theoretical volume floor there.
Yeah. Speaking of our projections, Chris Wecht, Crispy in this draft. Shout out Chris. He's been doing.
I did not know Chris's username. That's awesome.
There you go. I have
anytime I see that now.
Yeah.
Look at that.
And we drew the 101 here, so I think pretty clearly going to make this a Jefferson team. But yeah, Chris has been doing an awesome job with the projections. I won like 6K on the early only slate in DFS because I only use our projections. I make a few minor adjustments, but yeah, the fantasy points projections have been such a huge help to me this season, and I'm sure to subs as well, because they have been really, really good this year. Let's see, any other questions? We got a bit before our next pick will come up. Started out with Justin Jefferson on this team. Someone said 3 wide receiver PPR, lost Chris Godwin, my wide receiver 4 now says Waffle, but he corrected Jalen Waddle. Jalen Waddle, not Jalen Waffle. Better bench pickup, Ricky Pearsall, Noah Brown for wide receiver 5, or Braylon Allen as lotto ticket RB stash. I think pretty clearly Braylon Allen. He's one injury away from being a massive bell cow here. If you said, I don't want to listen to that, and I want a receiver for sure, I would definitely go with Noah Brown over Pearsall. Noah Brown's route share ticked up to a season high 73% last week. He's a top 20 player in yards per route run this season. So it's really just a routes issue for Noah Brown, and he should be getting those routes now. I think the coaching staff has finally come around to Noah Brown being, pretty clearly the second most talented wide receiver on this Washington team. Anything to add to that, Ryan?
No, that's pretty much it. And I'm not surprised that you knew exactly what Noah Brown's route share was this past week.
I have thought about Noah Brown quite a bit this week. He's a guy that I'm pretty excited about in DFS. I've actually taken, so in Battle Royale, I'm not super eager to take McLaurin. I think, a lot of people that are taking Jaden Daniels are just going to auto pick McLaurin. I've been scrolling down to Noah Brown in the hopes that he can just catch a deep pass or, maybe another Hail Mary. Who's to say? I like Noah Brown, not a guy that I'm, going to have a ton of exposure to in 6-mans. I think in 12-man drafts, he's really strong. And I think in DFS, he's a pretty solid way to save salary this week.
Yeah,
Coming up
I know you're a big believer in the, in the shadow matchup stuff. So Joey Porter potentially on McLaurin this week. So
there are
Noah Brown benefiting there.
There are two corners that I like that would cause me some hesitancy, and it's Pat Surtain and Joey Porter Jr. I'm still not a big believer in the shadow matchups. I think Surtain pretty clearly has an impact. Joey Porter Jr., jury's still out, but it's at least worth considering. And pretty clearly Joey Porter Jr., if he were to shadow, would shadow McLaurin over Noah Brown. So that is a positive matchup note for Noah Brown. Granted, not something I personally put a ton of stock in. Ryan, we're coming up on the 2-3 turn here. We already have Justin Jefferson. Aaron Jones is still on the board. What direction do we want to go with this team?
The pretty clear best two picks on the board are just like Jones plus Kelsey for me.
Yeah.
If you want to lock into a Darnold double, we can do that. That's the direction I like most.
That's also what I like most. I have taken a few Aaron Jones Jefferson teams. What I haven't done though is really worked in like Brian Thomas Jr. to many of those run backs so far. So that could certainly be an interesting angle. What do you think of the Jacksonville side of this game? Because that's sort of the tricky part to decipher. The market doesn't think Mac Jones is a significant downgrade from Trevor Lawrence. The line only moved 3 points once Trevor Lawrence was, sort of a surprise out this week when he popped up with an injury on Wednesday.
Yeah, I don't think he's that big of a downgrade either from just like a pure skill perspective. Like I obviously you never have that much confidence when a backup is stepping in, just in terms of how many reps they've gotten with the team. Obviously, Mac Jones has gotten no live game reps this week. So, and we've seen Mac Jones be very ugly, obviously, as you can see the Pats jersey hanging behind me. So I have no love lost for Mac Jones. But I mean, I will say this. I originally was writing up all of the Jaguars as this huge avoid because Trevor Lawrence has been so bad against the blitz specifically this year. And I just expected Flores to completely eat him up. Not to say that Flores couldn't totally eat up Mac Jones this week. That's also maybe like a 70% outcome. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I could see it, right? I could see at least Brian Thomas doing enough to be viable as like a correlation piece in Battle Royale or as a very low-owned correlation piece on the main slate. I don't think I'm that interested in it aside from as a bring back if you're stacking the Vikings, but Mac Jones isn't enough of like a death sentence to make a guy unplayable to me. I think I'm more down on like Engram for this than anybody.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. There was some coach speak about maybe getting BTJ some more design targets here. Coming up on the 4-5 turn, I imagine we probably certainly want Darnold to be one of our picks here because obviously if we get sniped on Darnold, this build is in a lot of trouble. What other direction should we go? Running back, I feel pretty comfortable waiting, knowing that guys like Dobbins, Swift, Connor are pretty much always around when you're drafting in the 6th round. So should we just go Darnold and BTJ here if that's what we want this build to be?
Yeah, you can do BTJ if Downs is on the board. Honest to God, might just take him as like my preferred wide receiver here.
Yeah,
I mean,
certainly.
you don't need to correlate you don't need to correlate 4 pieces in
Yeah.
a large tournament. But
yeah, this is for the main battle royale. I think in the $25 fullback dive, I'd be a lot more excited to take BTJ on a team like this. But for the battle royale, which is what 50,000 entries, yeah, you really don't need to worry nearly as much about correlation. So we can grab Sam Darnold and Josh Downs here before our final pick. Again, guys, feel free to ask any pressing questions you have on week 10 in the chat. AL Paul said this is the year for UC Bearcat basketball. Yes, sir. I absolutely agree. We are 15th in KenPom out of 364 college basketball teams. I really wish I could have watched the game tonight, but it tipped off at 7 and I have back-to-back live streams. So maybe I'll catch a replay, but I imagine we will be pretty good at basketball, ranked for the first time since 2019. I'm very, very excited about it. I'm sure I'll catch some games in February once I can get back to the beautiful city of Cincinnati. Ryan, I imagine you're not a big college basketball guy, right?
Not really. Yeah. I don't have I think if I went to like a bigger school like you did that had like a team I could get invested in, I probably would have. But yeah, I went to like a tiny little New England liberal arts college that I mean, our team was good, to be fair. We were D2, but we were in like the conference championships like every year. So it was fun to go. But yeah, like after the fact, it's hard to be as invested. You should go see what Chris's team looks like.
Oh yeah. Let's see what Chris is doing. I'm sure Chris has some Galaxy Brain stuff going on. So he's got a Purdy unstacked right now. Yeah, so he's got a Purdy, Bijan, Jonathan Taylor, Khalil Shakir, Cade Otton. I imagine Chris might just be drafting raw right off our rankings, which is certainly an interesting angle. I know Chris has just like generally speaking been a little bit down about correlation in general. Oh, and as I say,
there it is.
He grabs Jawan Jennings. Is Chris watching this show? He just might be. But yeah, this is a great team from Chris. I think a Purdy, Bijan, Jonathan Taylor, Shakir. So he gets a little bit of correlation there with the Shakir, JT, Jawan Jennings, Cade Otton. That's a really strong team from Chris, and a very unique Purdy team. Jawan Jennings, there aren't really any encouraging matchup notes, but we know the ceiling is there. I mean, he's looked pretty damn good. Obviously a bit of an afterthought with, Debo and Kittle back, but Debo's beat up. I could certainly see it in a game where we expect San Francisco to score almost 30 points, at least if you believe Vegas. What running back do you want to go with here for our final pick?
Let's see. We probably would like to get an ownership haircut here. So probably Stevenson or Harris. I know I talked up Stevenson in our projections meeting this morning. I don't know how I feel about us having him higher than Harris. But yeah, I mean, it could be okay.
Yeah, looking at our projections here, I mean, I do really like Ramondre. I think, the spread is 6 here, and we are going to end up taking Ramondre. The spread is 6, but I could easily see Chicago just absolutely laying an egg with the way that they've been playing. I mean, they have not been calling games. Well, what was it, 2 weeks ago in, one of the most important spots of the season, they give a handoff to their backup right guard at the 2-yard line. Doug Kramer, a guy that I played youth football with, who played offensive line in youth football. He's never gotten a carry in his entire life. And the Bears decided to give him one in an NFL game down 5 points. So yeah, I could easily see New England popping a bit here, even though the Bears defense has been very strong. But we're going to end up with a Sam Darnold, Ramondre Stevenson, Aaron Jones, Justin Jefferson, Josh Downs, Travis Kelce build. I think that's really strong. Like a lot of projection maxing, and then we get a solid late round pick in Ramondre. Let's see if we can hop into maybe a fullback dive here. Again, guys, if you have any questions on the Week 10 slate, feel free to drop them in this week or in the chat. Let's see. Maybe we can get into a Badge Bros Brawl. I don't think we've drafted one of those on stream, and those are pretty interesting. They only need 3 guys to fill. I don't quite know if I want to wait. Ryan, are there any spots on this slate that you feel like you're really struggling with? Like any areas that you feel like you're just pretty unsure about right now?
Any like in terms of player takes or?
Sure. Yeah. Player takes, game takes overall. I think for me, it's probably the Minnesota-Jacksonville game, just in terms of I really don't know how much Jacksonville is going to push, but I really want to play a lot of Sam Darnold. Do you have anything kind of similar to that?
So I want to like really believe in the Buffalo Indianapolis game. Like the Bills have been upping their pass rate over expectation over the past 3 weeks. The Colts have been like kind of fairly neutral if you throw out whenever they played Malik Willis. Basically, like they're not as big of like a run funnel as people assume. You can certainly beat the Colts any way you want to. So I could see that game shooting off. I can see any game with Joe Flacco and Josh Allen shooting off. Certainly. I don't know. So I'm not. It's not enough to where I'm like interested in Flacco or anything. But it's enough, kind of like we talked about earlier. It's enough to where I'm potentially interested in like overpaying for Josh Allen in Battle Royale, like you have to any week that you want to take him. Even like Amari Cooper's kind of interesting too. Like we just don't know how much he's going to play. With Coleman out, you would hope it's a lot. Like they've been kind of cryptic about the wrist injury. I don't know. Like the Colts do allow a lot to outside receivers. They've been very vulnerable deep. Was at least Cooper's game on the Browns. We obviously haven't seen much of how the Bills actually want to utilize him. But those are like extremely kind of fringy spots that I haven't totally made up my mind on this week. But I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's interesting. I've come around a lot more to Josh Allen than I thought I had in the beginning of the week. We're in the, by the way, Ryan, we're in the Deposit Kingdom, $10 entry, 1,600 total entrants. We drew the 101 again. I think I pretty clearly want to make this another Jefferson team. We can maybe go a different route than last week, unless you have any objections.
Yeah, let's go for it.
All right. Love that. But I do have a lot more interest in Allen than I would in a normal week, because I would expect things to be a bit more condensed, ideally around Shakir and Kincaid. I think Amari Cooper is a bit interesting, but again, he's beat up. Would anyone be shocked if he had a 50% route share this week? I don't think so. So I really just want Shakir and Kincaid, I think, in this game, but Dawson Knox scores 2 touchdowns and you're still drawn dead. But at least encouraging that the Bills have been throwing so much. A.L. Paul said in chat, assuming Jefferson and Aaron Jones are 100% drafted in this contest and you have both on your team, I think it's optimal to draft a different quarterback wide receiver stack, thinking Aaron Jones steals touchdowns from Darnold. Yeah, I certainly think that's an interesting route to go. I don't know if I would draft a different quarterback wide receiver combo on a team that has both Aaron Jones and Jefferson. But especially on Aaron Jones teams, I think you could certainly argue that he's just great leverage off of Sam Darnold and Justin Jefferson. Do you have a take on that, Ryan?
Yeah, I think if you have Jefferson, it's it is tough because there's always going to be some slight negative correlation between a Jefferson and an Aaron Jones because they can't both score touchdowns at the same time. So I think if you have both on your team, you have to take the positive correlation piece with both of them, which is Darnold. I don't know. That's just how I would view it. I don't know if both of their projections were just so insanely high. So you can do this on like main slates where if there's like 2 total extreme values in like a really condensed offense, I think you get away with that. Like Cooper Kupp plus Kyron Williams or whatever last year was a good example sometimes. And I'm fine taking Kittle here too.
I guess I'm just wondering.
I don't know if it applies on this slate.
I'm wondering what we should do for our other pick here. Obviously, Aaron Jones still on the board. We could grab Jonathan Taylor, who is a bit higher in our rankings and is actually popping a bit in our projections. So we could go that and then potentially make this a Purdy team. We could also do like a Jordan Addison build. I know, obviously we've acknowledged the matchup is incredible for Darnold in this entire passing game. And obviously that also applies to Jordan Addison. I think that's an interesting way to get different. Pretty clear that the default Sam Darnold build is either going to be Darnold with just Jefferson or Darnold with Aaron Jones and Jefferson as well. It's pretty easy to land on that stack. So I think I like Taylor here instead, and obviously don't want to be drafting the exact same team, just in general, and especially on a stream where we're trying to show off a few different builds. Anything to add on that, Ryan?
Yeah, that's like kind of the spot we were talking about earlier, where I agree Taylor's worth taking the risk in something like this. But if Purdy gets sniped, we're in kind of a tough spot. Or I mean, we're really not, because we have Jefferson. We can just make it another Darnold team, which is not good for stream, but it is fine for like your drafting. But yeah, if we add something like Barkley or Kamara in round 1, and then you're going Taylor plus Kittle, you're just really exposing yourself to, oh my God, now I have no way to stack anybody. If all the mobile QBs are gone, it's like, I'm stuck with Kirk Cousins. I've been traumatized by finding myself in that position a lot when I've been drafting this afternoon. But yeah, I think Jefferson gives you enough of an out that it's okay in this scenario to not just click Purdy at the 2-3 turn.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, Purdy may end up coming back to us here, which I would be pretty excited about. Yeah, exactly. Let's see. No Brock Purdy for us. All right. Well, now
I don't know if I've seen him get to the 4-5 turn a single time that I've drafted.
Wow.
And I've only done a dozen or so drafts, but yeah, the whoever took Debo just always takes him in my experience.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, so we're in a bit of a tricky spot here at the turn. I imagine we pretty much have to make this a Darnold team, I would think, right?
Yeah, pretty much, unless you want to do Baker plus Sterling Shepard or something like that.
I
think the best way to go is a Darnold team.
Yeah, I am not brave enough to go Baker plus Sterling Shepard. So let's grab Darnold. We could do like a Darnold Addison build here. And I don't really
think this is a good spot to do like a Darnold Brian Thomas.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I like that call for sure. Can queue up Brian Thomas. Then we just got to hope Mac Jones shows up a little bit in this game, which he certainly can. I mean, it's not like Trevor Lawrence was playing particularly well, like we sort of acknowledged at the top of the stream. Probably not a significant drop off here. My one concern is that Mac Jones hasn't played, really any football this year. And Brian Flores throws a ton of crazy blitzes at opposing quarterbacks. So could be a disastrous performance from Mac Jones. But again, he really only has BTJ and Evan Ingram to throw to this week. So target volume should be fairly condensed in a game that they're going to have to throw. I mean, I think it's, without question, Minnesota should maintain a lead throughout this contest. So far, we got a Darnold, Jonathan Taylor, Justin Jefferson, Brian Thomas, George Kittle, Bill.
BTJ is so far and away the best wide receiver Mac Jones will have ever thrown to in the NFL too.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, this is like a better offensive environment than what he was dealing with in New England. It was his last full season was it was last year, right? The 23 season when they had Patricia as the OC, who is a defensive coach. If I'm not mistaken, Ryan, that was a disastrous offense for a young quarterback.
No, so it was Patricia. Now I'm like memory holing the Mac Jones years. I think it was Patricia the first year, and then Bill O'Brien, who was supposed to be better, but hilariously was not any better than Matt Patricia as an offensive coordinator. So, yeah, that was I gonna be honest, was not very invested in Patriots football for the last year or so. Yeah, been a lot more interesting this year with May.
Yeah, I think that is totally reasonable. Producer Thomas said, don't forget the offensive assistant, Joe Judge. What an incredible offensive staff Belichick put together for that season. All right, coming up on our last pick here, we got a Darnold, Jonathan Taylor, Justin Jefferson, Brian Thomas Jr., George Kittle team. Let's see what we have available here at running back. James Cook is still on the board. Our rankings like Swift. We haven't really taken many scroll down options. What do you think? I'd be okay with Swift. I think that's fine. Could go James Conner here. Maybe Najee.
It's a small field, and Thomas is probably enough of a scroll down for it. I'd probably just go Swift because I pretty clearly prefer him. But I'm fine if you want to make the other call.
No, I think that's a good move. DeAndre Swift has had 18 touches in 5 straight games. The workload has been really, really strong. All he really needs is Chicago to win this game, and he should be in a great position, I believe, averaging close to 24 DraftKings fantasy points per game over Chicago's last 3 wins. So this will end up being a Darnold, Swift, Taylor, Jettas, Brian Thomas Jr., George Kittle team. Certainly like that. Let's see if we can maybe get into a fullback dive here. Oh, and it filled. All right. Our stream luck is back, Ryan. We had a great show 3 or 4 weeks ago where everything that we hopped into filled immediately, and then we had been running a little cold on stream over the last few weeks. We drew the 102 here. This is, I mean, I would be fine taking Justin Jefferson, but we have already drafted multiple Justin Jefferson teams here. Do you like, to me, the top 3 picks, really the Justin Jefferson 101 thesis is just that it gets so thin at wide receiver, but overall the top 3 picks between him, Barkley, Kamara, I think you could even throw CMC in there, are pretty similar in terms of raw projection, right? Are you seeing that any differently?
Yeah, no, totally agree. Yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, I'm equalizing my exposures there. So yeah, we'll see if like Jefferson jumps Barkley eventually, and then I'll be like running away from Jefferson at 101 to even things out for myself. But yeah, I definitely don't want to be underweight on any of those top 4.
Yeah, I would anticipate Jefferson comes up and ends like closes at the overall 101 because again, I mean, it just gets so thin at wide receiver. Josh Allen went 101. I mean, geez, what is going on? Ryan, who should we go here with the 102? We have our full, all the options available.
Let's go Kamara.
Okay.
And the reason I mean, they both project pretty similarly, and I like obviously both Barkley and Kamara. Kamara's a little more comfortable to me, where if we try to turn this into like a Purdy stack or something, even if you get sniped and fail on the Purdy stack, then you have Kamara as a built-in bring back for like the panic Kirk Cousins, Darnell Mooney stuff that you get forced into. So yeah, that's just something I've noticed. But yeah, I don't know that it's a tiebreaker at best.
Yeah. I think that's a solid angle. So this is a smaller field tournament. Again, the fullback dive, $25 entry, I believe, right around 1,000 entrants with $5K to first here. So this is a team where we really want to correlate pretty heavily. And I think the ideal turn would be if both Debo and Kittle were available. I would be really, really excited about a Purdy build. Even if we only grabbed one of those guys, you can always grab like a Jawan Jennings or a Pearsall near the end to jack up your correlation. Obviously could get bailed out with like a K-Dot as well as a bring back. No one else on the Tampa Bay side. Really interesting. Ryan, in like 12-man drafts, do you think you could ever see yourself getting to like a Baker Sterling Shepard or even a Baker Raheem Jarrett, something gross like that?
Oh God, I've given zero thought to 12-team drafts this week because that's just like horrifying to even imagine on this slate.
Yeah, and they have cut up, to be fair. Like the $3 12-man draft or 12-man contest is gone now, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean I think Baker Shepard I could get there. Yeah, I mean Baker's he's definitely a top 7 quarterback value for me on this slate. So yeah, anyone I can correlate with him that I mean Shepard only mildly makes me want to gouge my eyes out when I click the draft button. So it could definitely be worse.
Yeah, could do worse. I mean, at least he's playing in the slot, so he's getting a few of those, sort of schemed up Chris Godwin type targets. Obviously, he's a bit beat up. The route sure wasn't ideal last week, I believe closer to 55 or 60%, but still, Baker Mayfield has been playing out of his mind. And of course, no Deebo Samuel, no Kittle. So we have to go a bit of a different way for this draft. What do you think here, Ryan?
Yeah, it's tough. Allen's gone too. You can, so gross.
Yeah.
Just go like Aaron Jones, best available, I guess.
Okay. I'm fine with that. I think if Hurts comes back to us, and he will because Paul 3131 already drafted a quarterback, I'm intrigued by naked Hurts. What are your thoughts there? It's going to be tough for us to find a stack we like given the given the board.
Yeah, I mean, Otton Baker is like the only stack I like it on the board right now. But yeah, I agree that Hurts is probably better if you're getting no 49ers bringbacks available.
Yeah,
So.
and I don't have any Hurts exposure, so let's grab a Hurts team, and I really don't mind naked Hurts because again, I think the pass volume is just going to be incredibly low in this slate, and even if Hurts attempts 25 passes, he can still get you there on 2 tush pushes at the goal line, right? So, the ceiling for Jalen Hurts is massive, and we noted this on caching points. Sort of blew my mind. I believe it was either Hilo or Graham with the note. This is the first time since week 1 that Hurts has had the full complement of weapons with Goddard, AJB, and Devontae Smith. So yeah, I think this is, and obviously this Dallas defense is a complete disaster. The only real concern with Hurts is pass rate. But again, for a team like this, where we aren't going to be able to get to our preferred quarterbacks of, Purdy or Darnold, I think it makes a lot of sense to grab a naked Hurts. We could maybe even grab like Goddard with our tight end pick in the end. It's just a matter of sort of piecing together wide receiver. I wouldn't hate CeeDee Lamb on a team like this. Cooper Rush is a capable backup. I don't, he's certainly nothing special, but he can get the ball to CeeDee Lamb. I know Grant Barfield acknowledged in the Fantasy Points Discord, the books seem to have overreacted pretty significantly to the quarterback change. I think CeeDee Lamb's receiving prop was somewhere in the 50s. I mean, he's still pretty close to a lock for at least 12 targets, I think, right, Ryan?
Yeah, no, I didn't even know that. I need to go. I need to go take some CeeDee Lamb props. Damn.
I'm sure it's come up a little bit because that did seem ridiculously low, but I did think that was a good call from Graham when I got the Discord notification there.
Yeah, no, that's great, and yeah, I would love him as a bring back here.
All right.
Not that interested in Devontae Smith. With a midweek hamstring, or I guess it was a Wednesday hamstring, no practice to a limited on Thursday. I don't know what he did today.
No injury designation. I think he got a full practice in today. I mean, I'm not going to end up in DFS or Battle Royale. I'm not going to end up on, much of these Philadelphia receivers because again, pass game volume is such a concern. They could realistically have a 35 or 40% pass rate in this game. I think we have them projected close to, 46, 47%. And yeah, you could argue that's a bit too aggressive. Unfortunately, don't get CeeDee Lamb here. So we are really struggling at wide receiver. DeAndre Hopkins has a brutal matchup, but the usage was there last week. I actually kind of like George Pickens a bit because we know the upside can be there. He should get those lobs in a game where they're expected to trail. What do you want to do at wide receiver and tight end here?
Yeah, I agree. Pickens is probably where I'd go.
Okay.
Ideal schematic matchup. Like they've been playing more single high the past 4 games. It's just that the Commanders have actually been really good against the deep ball. We don't know that, or I think Lattimore's not playing was, I believe what I saw. I could be totally wrong on that. But yeah, no, I could see it with Pickens. Maybe a little thin, but that's everything on this slate. And then, yeah, I think Downs is clearly the one I prefer after that. And tight end, we can take whoever falls.
Yeah, I'm right. Actually,
there everyone's taking a tight end, so yeah.
All right, yeah, I think we're looking good here. I mean, Downs pretty clearly the best player in our rankings, as you can see. Devontae Smith, pretty massive projection gap between the two, so that's why we are going to pass on the stack, even in a bit of a smaller field tournament here. Tricky situation, but I think we've made the most of it, Ryan. Jalen Hurts, Alvin Kamara, Aaron Jones, George Pickens, Josh Downs so far on this team. At tight end, I am interested in Goddard a bit, even just for the correlation. I know the projection isn't particularly strong. I'm going to pull it up on my screen. Do you have any thoughts on Goddard? Have you seen anything schematically? I'd imagine it probably plays more into the hands of the wide receivers here.
Yeah, no, it's mostly an outside type of funnel, and to be honest, did not spend that much time on the Eagles passing game this week because I was like, okay, I think I know kind of how this game's going to go down. And
there isn't much reason to spend a lot of time on the Eagles passing game when even in a shootout type environment, you're not projecting Jalen Hurts for more than 28 pass attempts probably. So. Yeah, that is tricky. Obviously, if Trey McBride made it back to us, I'd be pretty excited about that. I think you said everyone has a tight end. I was wrong. I just assumed I was incorrect. He he might grab McBride, but obviously that would be best available for us. I don't hate Kincaid. Don't hate Hawkinson. Get a little bit of correlation with Pitts because we did take Kamara, but I'm not super. I don't feel very strongly about it, I should say.
Yeah, Kincaid would probably be my preferred pick. I think he's our
okay.
I think McBride's projection's higher, but yeah, we get the correlation with Downs there.
Yeah, so, that's a good call. I mean, there's certainly a scenario where the Buffalo-Indianapolis game shoots out in some capacity. Downs and Kincaid absorb a lot of the fantasy goodness there. Jalen Hurts, he can pretty easily rush in 2 touchdowns, maybe throw for another 1 or 2. Alvin Kamara and Aaron Jones are right there as the best running back plays of the slate. And then all you need is a couple Russell Wilson lobs to George Pickens, and all of a sudden you're looking at 5K in a battle royale draft. But yeah, it looks like this is going to end up as a Hurts, Kamara, Jones, Pickens, Downs, Kincaid. I mean, I guess if McBride makes it back to us, I will probably take McBride here.
Yeah, I don't know. We got destroyed on that board. Like that was just the combination of all the 49ers being gone, and then the guy on the turn took both Falcons receivers at the 2-3 turn. There was just nowhere else to go really besides naked Jalen Hurts, which the amount of time it took you to like explain the thesis of the team tells me it's probably not that likely with how many different things kind of have to break for this.
It does feel,
I do think we drafted as optimally as we could given the cards we were dealt here.
Yeah, it does feel pretty thin, but sometimes that's the tricky thing with these battle royales. In DFS, you'll always end up with the exact teams you want. In battle royale, you certainly will not, because people will do either weird stuff or drafts will just go a little unexpected or a bit out of your favor. But yeah, ends up being a Hurts, Kamara, Aaron Jones, Pickens, Downs, Trey McBride team. I think that's solid from a projection standpoint. I don't necessarily know that that's anything close to my favorite build for this sort of tournament here. I think Purdy doubles or even triples would probably be my favorite angle for the fullback dive. Still have a couple minutes, so we'll draft one more battle royale team before we get out of there. If you guys have any last minute questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. But this has been a really fun show as we head into our final battle royale draft here. Ryan, do you want to do anything weird with this last team? Obviously, we've talked at length about Darnold and Purdy sort of being our favorite quarterbacks. We already drafted a Jalen Hurts team in smaller field. Are there any sort of weirder angles that you think would be viable in like a larger field battle royale draft?
So large field, probably my favorite take is just this is not like easy to do either, but specifically Debo with Otton and Baker or McCaffrey, or Debo and McCaffrey with Otton and Baker. So you get like the double 49ers bring back. And it just, the story is maybe specifically with McCaffrey, where some of the touchdowns come on the ground, or I guess they could come on the ground with Debo as well. And Baker just outscores Purdy in a shootout. Then I could get behind that. And that's not that hard of a story to tell yourself. And there just aren't that many other like really good contrarian things to do. I did like what Chris did in that draft a couple drafts ago. Just adding Jawan Jennings into his Purdy stack. That, I mean, all you need there is for the touchdowns to go to whatever other 49ers piece you're picking there. I think Pearsall makes just as much sense as well. So that's probably here and on the main slate is, instead of like what quarterback am I getting weird with aside from Baker, I'm thinking how am I getting weird in my Purdy lineups is more or less is how I'm approaching it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Purdy's going to be crazy popular this week, and we drew a great pick to grab Christian McCaffrey here at the 103. So let's do it and see what we can make happen with this. But yeah, 103, 104 is certainly an area where I'm looking to take a lot of McCaffrey. I don't know what exactly you have in mind for his usage this week, but I was thinking probably worst case, it's similar to the Devon Achane role that we saw last week, where he's looking at 5 to 7 targets, 10, 12, maybe even 14 carries. But all the empty calorie stuff is going to be removed from his workload. I would imagine. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if he was just a 90% snap share guy again, but I also wouldn't be shocked if it was closer to 70 with, Garendo and Jordan Mason absorbing a lot of those carries at like the 45-yard line that just don't really matter. And then they obviously would bring McCaffrey in for everything inside the 10 and all the passing down stuff, which can still be a super valuable role. He's crushed these high total games too. And this is, pretty clearly the highest total game on the slate. So I like McCaffrey a lot. I think there's a justifiable argument that he's the overall 101 on this slate. We just don't really know. That's something I really want to lean in a lot with my DFS lineups, where he's only going to be 10 to 15% owned. I think getting a lot of McCaffrey exposure makes a ton of sense. It's just how exactly do you afford to pay up for him, because this is a slate star for value, and we see that in Battle Royale as well. There's aren't a ton of scroll down options that I'm particularly excited about. Not a lot of scroll down options that project particularly well. Anything to add on McCaffrey's workload, or sort of how you're seeing that?
Yeah, he's just so great both here and in the main slate. Just from a game theory perspective, because I want him in lineups with Purdy, where it's going to be a slightly less popular way. I'm assuming to stack than to just do like the Debo Kittle double. And so that I'm interested in that. He's great leverage, obviously, off of all the very chalky 49ers pieces. I love what we're doing here too.
This is,
we just have to, the decision point is just, wait, no, I'm wrong. We're taking Baker. I was just thinking about, I'm still traumatized from getting sniped on Purdy, but yes, we're taking Baker. We don't have to worry about it. We can just take K-Dot.
Baker's a guy that you can confidently wait on until round 6, because he's only the QB 10 in drafts. So, and especially if assuming we get K-Dot in here, there is no reason for anybody to take Baker. It doesn't matter what rankings or projections you're using. Baker's just not going to come off the board, despite the fact that he's been playing really, really well. I had a note for caching points. I forget if I said it on the stream or not, but the list of players who have had 5 or more games over, I believe it's 27 DraftKings fantasy points, is Baker Mayfield, and that's it. That's the end of the list. That includes Lamar Jackson, who's had an extra game. It's unreal how good Baker has been playing. And you might say I'm down on Baker because he doesn't have any receivers left. He crushed last week despite not having any wide receivers. I mean, it really is crazy what Baker Mayfield has done. I'm sure Browns fans are just absolutely kicking themselves for getting that guy out of town. But yeah, this is a great start to a team. This is sort of exactly what Ryan outlined. And I think this is a really interesting idea, especially for some of these larger field tournaments, grabbing McCaffrey, grabbing Deebo Samuel, and then grabbing Kate Otten. We can run it back, or not run it back, but stack with Baker Mayfield here in this spot. I guess we could grab Purdy if he comes back to us, but I think I'd rather make this a Baker team. I've been talking to Baker. That was sort of what we came in mind with. So we could go like a Josh Downs Baker type team. I mean, I think it's pretty clear based on the way that I've been drafting and the way our rankings are looking that I'll probably end up with close to 40% Josh Downs, because I just don't have a lot of confidence in these other wide receivers here. And Purdy's off the board, so our plan's working perfectly here, Ryan. How I'm curious, Ryan, in your builds, like how much Downs exposure would you be comfortable with overall? Say you draft 100 teams, would you be okay with 30 to 40% Downs? Because if you're drafting off our rankings, that might be pretty close to what you're pushed to.
I think so, honestly, because there just aren't good alternatives. Like if Josh Downs goes out and scores 12 fantasy points this week, am I going to be happy about it? No. Do I think that's actually going to kill like my entire Battle Royale portfolio with how the rest of the receiver position looks? No, honestly. I would not. A couple weeks back, I had this stat where we have generally averaged 4 to 5 20+ point receiver performances each week over the last few years. This season, we've been averaging 1 to 2 pretty much. It might be 0 this week, would not be at all surprised. So I think just it's weird to think about floor kind of in a tournament format like this, but I really do think in terms of the wide receivers people are going to have exposure to, I almost would think about, okay, who do I know is not going to bomb out on me? And Downs feels like one of the better bets there. If you need to get different off of Downs, I think on the main slate as well as here in Battle Royale, it makes sense. I think Khalil Shakir is just like a slightly worse version of kind of the same thesis play.
Yeah.
So that you could mix some of that in as well if you just feel decent about that game environment. Shakir again has just as good of a schematic matchup as Downs. You've got the same kind of condensing of the target trees. So that, I guess that if you really need to get off of it, then that's probably what I do. But yeah, I'm totally fine doing 30-40% Downs in my portfolio this week, as we've talked about.
Yep. Yeah, obviously I feel the same way as a guy who is drafting, pretty close to 30 or 40% Josh Downs, but really like this team that we grabbed. Christian McCaffrey, James Conner, Deebo Samuel, Josh Downs, Kate Otten. Assuming we don't get sniped, which it doesn't look like we will, and it wouldn't obviously make any sense, we'll grab Baker Mayfield here to round this team out. But yeah, I think this is a really interesting build, and it'll certainly be unique for a format even as large as the main Battle Royale. Shout out Fantasy Dog Pound in the chat. What's going on, Pat? Really appreciate you hopping on last week. I'm sure we'll get you on again here soon. But yeah, this has been a really fun time drafting these teams here, Ryan. Do you have any other notes on the slate before we get out of here after this last pick?
No, man, that's kind of it. Like, I feel like if anything on this slate is going to kill me, it's that I didn't pick the correct 2 running backs out of like the 12, like incredibly enticing options.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess like for who I've been shying away from a little bit, it's been I haven't taken much Breece Hall. I haven't taken much Kareem Hunt. Hunt can certainly score twice on the goal line, as we've seen plenty this year, kind of regardless of what the matchup is. But yeah, I feel like I'm almost cheating on like a small slate, like mid-season after we've had a few like 13 game slates. I feel like I just am all over every angle of this, especially with so many games that aren't actually in play at all whatsoever. So yeah, it's hard. Yeah, I feel great about this, and I'm very ready to go minus 90% across all my action this week.
Yeah, that's how, for whatever reason, that's how things always seem to go for me. When I feel great about a slate, I go negative 80%. And when I'm like, I don't quite know about this one, that's when I bank and, make 5 or 10K. But yeah, this is a really interesting slate. I mean, I would expect scores are going to be very, very low. I would not be surprised if the winning score in the Battle Royale was the lowest we've seen all year. Same thing with the DraftKings Millionaire Maker. But hopefully from watching the show, you guys have found some solid angles for this fairly difficult to navigate Week 10 slate. Again, we really appreciate all the comments, all the viewers. It means a lot, guys. We're always trying to grow the Battle Royale product here at Fantasy Points. So hop into our Discord. Feel free to ask me and Ryan any questions you guys have. Again, I will be dropping Battle Royale rankings in there at noon tomorrow. So you can just upload those straight into DraftKings, get a good sense for what players our projections are favoring. As you could see while I was drafting, had the sort of beta version of those rankings in my Underdog profile while I was drafting. So yeah, definitely check that out. Look at our Discord. Thanks again for all the comments and the views, and we will see you guys at the top of the leaderboards this week.
What? Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.